I love Mary's song in today's text. She is so confident and full of faith and love for God. But I often have to temper that and wonder, when did Mary first ask herself, what have I gotten myself into? We've all asked ourselves this question. I ask it just getting on the TTC most days. And so I am sure that Mary, making the leap from virgin to expectant mother of the Savior of the world, I am sure she asked herself, what have I gotten myself into at some point? This question isn't doubt exactly. It's the realization that we have underestimated the magnitude of a decision. It's the sudden understanding that a burden is heavier, that a journey may take longer than we initially surmised. And this understanding is the precedent to doubt. After asking what we've gotten ourselves into, we usually then ask, how am I going to do this? And often the immediate answer is, I don't know. Cue doubt. When doubt first arrives, it can be terrifying. Every year during Advent, we take some time to think about Mary and her part in the birth of Christ. But sometimes I wonder if we take enough time to consider her part in his actual life when he finally got here. Every year, I think a little more about everything that Mary agreed to when she accepted God's call. She didn't just agree to bear a child, she agreed to raise him. Jesus wasn't going to be delivered a fully developed redeemer. She had to raise him into one. And as all the parents in the room know, you need to raise a competent human being who knows how to look both ways when crossing the street, before you teach them to be philosophically astute or spiritually aware. Mary was certainly not told, don't worry, he's the Son of God. He'll basically raise himself. Jesus may have been the one foretold in prophecies who would perform miracles and forgive sins and usher in God's kingdom, but Mary would have to teach him not to kick his brothers at the table first. Parenting is a daunting task, even when you don't know what your child's destiny is. I'm not a parent, and I know this. And in life, it is one of a multitude of very enticing things that we can do that promise to be very rewarding. University degrees, careers, traveling, friendships. Life is full of pursuits that are absolutely worthwhile and enticing. But often on the journey, usually when it is too late to turn back, we encounter setbacks and challenges, and we find ourselves asking that somewhat threatening question, what have I gotten myself into? Some of us may be asking ourselves this question in our lives right now, realizing we've undertaken a task that requires much more than we'd initially bargained for. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you're feeling this, but if I did, I know we would have a sea of hands in this room, because life is unpredictable and we don't see what lies ahead, and quite often we end up feeling a bit at sea as a result. So it can be comforting to know that actually we're not alone. We're not adrift in the wilderness, stranded by life's hardships. Knowing that people you are surrounded by have also experienced this same doubt and uneasiness and perhaps dread can make all the difference in how you gauge your progress and whether or not you think you're going to be okay. Remembering that others struggle too makes it easier to reach out for help, or to reach out to someone that you suspect may be in need. This, my friends, is the beauty of community. When we struggle, we are not alone. Perhaps you're feeling overwhelmed by a relationship or a project or a role or a job. And while I'm not asking people to raise their hands to indicate this, I really am tempted because of how important it is to remember we are not on our own. When we find ourselves in time of trouble, it is essential that we do not isolate ourselves, but instead find ways of reaching out and connecting with other people for support. No one can do our job for us, but feeling heard and understood matters. When we're lucky, we sometimes even get a helping hand, or sometimes really good advice or direction. Today's gospel begins with Mary arriving at the home of Elizabeth. But right before our text starts is when she gets the visitation from the angel, telling her that she is to be the mother of the Savior of the world. And when he speaks to her, the angel actually mentions Elizabeth, because Elizabeth is carrying a child too, despite having been barren. Nothing is impossible with God, the angel says to Mary. He's practically winking. Yes, she is to undertake a task that she cannot fathom the immensity of, but he is sure to remind her that God is with her, and also reminds her of Elizabeth, who is undergoing something huge and intense herself. The angel explicitly is telling Mary she's not alone. And the next thing we know, Mary is appearing on Elizabeth's doorstep. Some time has passed. We know that Mary is pregnant by the time she arrives, but the text goes straight from Mary accepting this big responsibility to Mary connecting with someone who will understand. Instead of isolating herself, she reaches out, perhaps before she can allow herself to get overwhelmed. And she is met by Elizabeth's enthusiastic support. And Mary's confidence soars. Her confidence in herself, her confidence in God. And we now have recorded this beautiful song of her heart. Anyone who does well in life has help. Self-made people all have help. Wise people will actually talk about the help that they've had along their journey. We are not actually meant to be or do anything alone. So even when you are undergoing something that no one can fix or make easier, please remember how much it helps to have a witness to everything that you are carrying and undertaking. Feeling understood can be the legs that carry you even part of the way. My friends, this is community. This is nothing short of love. And love is more than a perfect mom cooing over her silent, sleeping newborn. Love is being present for one another, offering safety, and bearing one another's burdens. Make sure you trust your community so that you do not forfeit the help and support of those who love you. Reaching out can make you feel vulnerable, it's true, but it is a risk often worth taking. Trusting someone is also an act of love. We see that Mary did a good job with Jesus. He turned out all right. In Jesus, we have an example of love that is manifested in so many different ways. And in the last few months, we've reflected together on the different ministries of Christ's love. His healing of the bleeding woman, his raising of Jairus' daughter, his high standard of the behavior and belief of his disciples, his feeding of multitudes of hungry people. All these things he did out of love for his community near and far. And it fulfilled God's will, which is always to love. It wasn't enough that Jesus was someone of great power who could perform miracles. God's will was for Jesus to be someone that people could reach out to and who would offer his power in love. Through Jesus, we see God's perfect love, the kind of love that drives out fear and replaces it with hope, the kind of love that meets vulnerability with safety and support, that gently transforms us from stressed out, isolated people into people who can connect and be honest without fear. It takes practice, but this kind of love is very real. We have seen it in Jesus, and I hope we see it in one another. This Advent, I pray that you will find the strength in this story of Mary and her faith in her God and her faith in her community, and how she was able to help raise a son that knew God, that knew God's will, and brought God's kingdom of love to the world. And in your own struggles, I pray that you will remember God's love and the love of your community, and that you will also be able to offer that same love to those who need it. Amen.